So, Helluva Boss Season 2.
Ass on my face!
Don't act like what we have is anything but you wanting me to fuck you, okay?
I love you, Dad.
Never replace you no matter what you
Sorry, sweetie. You lied to me once and you'll do it again.
If you're familiar at all with my channel, you should be well aware this isn't the first time that I've talked about Helluva Boss. Hell, sometimes it's part of the more recently popular videos where I can put one of the characters in the thumbnail. It's because while the series is certainly one that is heavily flawed in my opinion, it's a series I really want to like, not only because of the sometimes absurdly beautiful animation, but for the world that Helluva Boss can present. The music for the series is also really well done, and while it's not to the level of me wanting to put it on my iPhone to listen to while I just chill or work out, they're still really good songs. I preface this by saying that I am going to be critical in this video. I want it to be well known that it's a series that I do want to really enjoy, but for one reason or another, it's something that can't sit well with me. So, I'm MangaKamen, this is Helluva Boss, the ever-conflicting series, Part 2. Spoilers ahead. That being said, I'm not going to be doing a lot of recapping in this video, so there will be some level of familiarity needed for the series for this critique. This series is free to watch on YouTube, so I don't see how that's a bad thing to do. So sit down, grab a snack, rub up those draw tablets, and let's get to hell. Welcome to hell, my friends! If for some reason you're watching this video and don't know what Helluva Boss is, then hi! Welcome to my own personal hell! If you're just interested into the analysis, then chapters will be provided, but I will have a little bleed into this section with that, so be aware. With its pilot originally airing in 2019, Helluva Boss is the creation of Vivziepop, a prominent animator who broke out years prior and even has a related show called Hazbin Hotel that last year got picked up by Amazon. The story of Helluva Boss is a little messy to say the least, with the story focusing around the boss of an imp in hell called Blitz, with the O being silent. He runs a business where he and his employees travel to the human world to kill people on behalf of the sinners who want someone dead in their previous life. It's an interesting premise, which can lead to some funny scenarios. However, as anyone who's seen the show can attest, that's not what we actually got. Yes, the premise that was presented in the pilot isn't what we get. Most of the time, at least. Rather, the story follows the interpersonal relationships of the main character Blitz, exploring his past and seeing how it holds him back from diving into the relationship with the demon royalty owl, Stolas. This interpersonal relationship between Blitz and Stolas has taken the main focus of the show, as well as we get into, there's a bit of an issue with that. I want to make it clear that just because the show's premise and how it came out differently isn't inherently an issue. Nor is it due to the fact that the show focuses on the two Twig boys and them getting their freak on and addressing their feelings for each other. Or I should probably tack on an allegedly with that last point since it's hard to really talk about this sort of thing. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's get to the actual critiques. Yes, finally, the part of the video that person actually cares about. Ah yeah, here comes the part where Kamen says Vivziepop can't write shite.
My leg! Don't touch me, I'm sterile!
Contrary to what the people who love sticking forks in electrical outlets for fun like to think, I don't think the whole of Helluva Boss's writing and characterization is terrible. But that isn't to say that there aren't problems, which we'll get into those in a minute or two. When you really look at Helluva Boss's episodes on an individual level, there's quite a bit of praise to be had, especially with the emotional beats in the actual performances. All Too You being a prime example of the show conveying the conflicting emotions that Stolas has with a recent breakup between him and Blitz is not only thematically a great song with beautiful visuals and a bit of an ironic twist thrown in the background, with Verosika and Vortex basically telling him that he's not in the wrong for the situation, without them actually knowing what happened, or the whole relationship between one of the 7 deadly sins, Ozzy and Blitz's childhood friend Fizzaroli, probably being one of the healthier relationships I've seen done in animation, with their chemistry being really notable and fun. But that's the thing right there. In a vacuum, the episodes can theoretically work pretty well, and sometimes Helluva Boss can have the markings of a cohesive story going on. However, Helluva Boss doesn't really do that.
Crap.
I spent a long time trying to really put my finger on how to describe the issues with Helluva Boss's writing, and I think I finally have the right words to describe it. The series is really trying its best to be serial, which, if you're not really aware of, a serial storyline is when there's an ongoing narrative where each episode builds off the previous episodes and which would act as a setup for the future episodes. Meanwhile, if we're talking about episodic-based shows, it's when the plots of each individual chapter are self-contained for the most part, meaning you can pick up any episode you want to watch and not have to worry about there being any continuity. Insert zombie Simpson joke here.
Trolled, memed, jiffed, and dare I say, pwned.
Am I dead yet?
What I mean to say with that is one is a purely episodic-based show will often reset their characters back to zero, with any possible development they have also being reset in the process. To be clear, these are not a one or the other situation. Episodic-based shows can also have regression in them. What I mean to say is that the plots start and end with the episode, but what happens to the characters in the episode shows up later down the line. Then there's episodic with a bit of a serial storyline, where most of the episode still has its self-contained story, but will have elements that bring in an overarching storyline. Oftentimes, said storyline will be wrapped up in the season finale. Season 1 falls underneath that last one I described, which had elements of Stolas and Blitz's relationship being more in the background of episodes, most of the time. And it culminated in the episode of Aussies. However, Season 2 is a bit messier to really put into those categories since there are episodes that are just self-contained stories, but the season transitions into a more of an ongoing narrative into the issues of Blitz and Stolas and the will they, won't they, and they do BS. And that's fine, that's not the issue. The issue is when you consider that there seemed to be a tonal transition between the Season 1 and Season 2, ignoring elements that seem to be really important but get dropped off the face of the earth. And for an overarching storyline, that's not a good thing! One of the strengths that Helluva Boss has is that its episodes tend to take a long time to actually release. Sometimes you have a few months between them, with the least amount of them being 1 month after each other. It prepares a somewhat bubble where you can remember things about the previous episode, but not all the finer details. Unless you're a nitpicky asshole whose job it is to look up stories in depth and actually consider them. Luckily for you guys, my nitpicking license expired in 2020 and I don't need to do that. Let's consider one of the biggest issues that having this sort of story format created. Do you guys remember this scene from Aussies?
Stolas, don't act like what we have is anything but you wanting me to fuck you, okay?
Of course you do, because I just played it a few minutes ago in between my insane rambling. Well, that cold dose of reality never really gets brought up again in the series. At most, you have a single text message that gets shown up in a blink and you miss it moment. Because, guess what? That's not actually addressing the issue that happened here. And that means it's time for the fans to put things together in that regard.
The dynamic where it changed was when they were called out about their relationship at Aussie, where Stolas gets a good look of what love really looks like between two people who care about each other and realizes, damn, that's not our relationship. This is where he begins to try for them to be more. After the incident with Stryker, he realizes how imps see royals, and then just realizes that their dynamic is just wrong.
And that would be fine if that was actually true, because Stolas never really comes to realize how imps see royals. If he did, he wouldn't be using Stryker's words as an attack against Blitz afterwards.
I don't look down on you. You speak just like that vile Stryker friend of yours, the one who tried to kill me and you couldn't be bothered to come help me. Remember him?
Now, I'm not disagreeing this sort of thing is possible, and that Stolas could learn that imps view him as nothing more than trash, but we don't see that expressed so far in the season. If anything, the issue is...
Oh, lords. I'm poor now.
Now, I bring this up because it feels like a combination that we don't have full-on proper foundation for these events before the actual episode, because they'll show up with a pinch of information and context that we're missing, or cut out a dash of the writers forgetting things that happened earlier in the episodes. Take, for example, this line in the Season 2 finale.
You have always been the only good thing in my life.
Does that mean you just stayed miserable because of me? Was I some fucking obligation? Is that why you didn't even hesitate when you got a chance to leave?
And if you recall the first episode of this season...
The only reason I have endured your constant insults and cruelty was for that girl to have a normal life.
Octavia got it right in one! And with that, you could say the fact that Stolas' pill bottles are enough of a foreshadow for this, but think about how much more powerful it would have worked if Octavia had actually overheard Stolas say these words and kept thinking to herself that it was just her parents being in the heat of an argument. Not like they haven't done things like that before.
You want to fuck this one too?
That got a little off topic. But my point is that when you really watch the story of Helluva Boss as a more of a serialized nature, it's bogged down by a lot of stuff and feels like there's a lot of steps being skipped at the same time. Here's a problem of an example. This is Fizzaroli, and he probably has one of the best episodes in the entire second season that focuses on his employment under another 7 deadly sin, Mammon, with a lot of themes and even shows that despite the evil capitalist nature of entertainment— by the way, don't forget to check out the Helluva Boss merch store— it shows a lot of the villain for the character, and it's ultimately a pointless episode. Yeah, you heard me. In the grand scheme of things of Helluva Boss, this episode doesn't really contribute anything to the overarching narrative. We already knew there was a bit of a social taboo of someone like Ozzy, a 7 deadly sin as well as an upper-ranked demon having a relationship with a lowly imp like Fizzaroli. Otherwise, you have a support character getting at least 2 episodes dedicated to him. The first one makes sense since it also developed Blitz with the two reconciling over a mistake, which has its own issues, but one at a time here, folks. Meanwhile, when this episode aired, 2 of the main cast, Millie and Luna, had gotten the least amount of development, even though they were very important to our main character Blitz as being a part of their modern-day family. And while Millie did eventually get some characterization and even a fleshed out backstory with her— yeah, sorry, I like making money on YouTube, so I'm sure you guys can put 2 and 2 together for that one. But even though Millie had gotten some fleshing out, the fact that it took so long when other characters like Fizz got 2 whole episodes where he was either sharing the focus or was the main focus, it kind of feels like—
We're good.
hell, the episode I was talking about, you could just write Blitz out of the story and nothing would change with the narrative. And it sucks for me to say that when this episode was pretty much pointless in the grand scheme of things, because it shows that the writing in Helluva Boss can be pretty good, with a little bit of self-awareness sprinkled in.
Also, if you're a chick, maybe give up on your dreams now, because I'm not gonna lie, women just ain't funny. Anyway!
But the fact that this episode was so good, but had no actual narrative weight to the overall plot, kinda shows a bit of a hole with the overall storytelling of Helluva Boss. It's like the show has an issue of priorities, and while this is the most egregious example, there are other times where it spends its screening on something that ultimately doesn't matter. Consider the Full Moon episode. You can skip a majority of it since it mostly just has some heel-dragging plot of the villains, quote-unquote, known as the Cherubs trying to kill Blitz, while the imp is preparing for a romantic night with Stolas. And you can ignore all of that and have the episode focus on the romantic meeting and the drama that's included with ends with— this isn't to say you can't have episodes or subplots that aren't related to the overall story that you're trying to convey, but here's the thing, it should be in service of the plot, especially if you're an indie series that needs to budget what they're doing. Otherwise, it's wasted effort, it's wasted time, and it's wasted money.
I'm poor now!
And this circles back to the episodic stuff I was talking about, because with how Helluva Boss is structured in this way, the flow of the story is super messy because of it. The show wants to be continuous, all the while using the episodic rules. But Kamen, that just makes it more realistic and— yes, life can be messy, and sometimes chaotic events will happen, but that doesn't really equate to the writing to be good. You can be as realistic as you want, but that doesn't mean that the writing will be good, nor does it make your narrative believable.
With this, Senator, I'm gonna knock you out! Try University of Texas! Could've gone pro if I hadn't joined the Navy! I'm not one of those beltway pansies! I could break the president in 2 with my bare hands! You're nothing! Nice.
And even then, it's still wasting time and has messed up priorities. Hell, let's consider Seeing Stars, the second episode of Season 2. Let's ignore the fact that we're glossing over the whole—
Don't act like what we have is anything but you wanting me to fuck you, okay? You make that really clear all the time.
see the thumbnail where it has Octavia and Luna in it? You would think that most of the episode is focused on the two actually meeting, bonding, and— psych! Most of the episode is focused on Stolas and Blitz, who are trying to find Octavia in the real world, and they get dragged off to a TV studio where things get wacky and out of control with acid water. Woo! And again, the actual important part of the episode is near the end when Luna finds Octavia and gives a speech that in a vacuum makes sense, but with everything we've seen—
that doesn't make any sense. Neither do women.
It honestly feels like clickbait with the amount of filler in the episodes, because you can totally have just had the whole situation with Stolas and Blitz go off screen and let the audience come to their own conclusions. Hell, the actual other important scene with Blitz adopting Luna could have been remembered via Luna's perspective, and it would have made her speech have a lot more impact because it would show that she does care for her father despite being adopted and— Yeah, that right there, I guess. Daughter of the Year, I suppose. Again, this isn't me saying that there aren't any redeeming qualities with the writing, but there's a lot of fluff that does hold back the episodes, especially since the show kind of warped into a more storyline-driven structure that is still episodic and that clashes so much. And that plays into another issue.
You're a colorful bunch.
In the last chapter, I brought up Visiroli and how he got at least 2 episodes where he was either part of the lead or was the main character of said episodes, and how he got developed before 2 of the arguably more prominent, more obviously earlier introduced characters like Luna and Millie. And this leads into an issue that I've noticed is a bit of a trend when I talk about issues in writing: characters. Or to be more specific, too many characters.
All of these guys are absolutely essential. How many of them could you possibly cut while telling the same story?
Dear God, no! I'm already dealing with Helluva Boss right now. I don't need another garbage fire thrown onto the plate. Side note, F you for thinking Frankie is important to One Piece. Back on topic, Helluva Boss has a pretty big roster of characters, so I decided to count all the characters who appear in the episodes who talk and aren't just a one-off episode. And I count about 24 characters. Give or take, because sometimes you never know if a character is going to show up again in some capacity, like how Martha showed up in the first official episode, then showed up later in an apology tour as a sinner, banging Miss Mayberry. Neat. And to be even more fair, sometimes the characters with this are regulated to a small conversation, like Sally May, who only fell into that criteria because she was the one that Millie called in the last episode. But my issue is that there are a lot more cast bloat here, and there are a lot of recurring characters who take a lot more active roles than the main cast. Arguably, you could say that the 2 main leads of the show are Blitz and Stolas, with Blitz being the main character, obviously. As such, it's easy to point out that the current group that Blitz lives and works with should be regarded as the secondary cast: Millie, Moxie, and Luna. Stolas could fit in that as well, but could easily classify him as a deuterologist considering all his screen time and how he's tied into the plot. The issue is how the characters are used as well as how they're utilized. Consider probably one of the worst episodes in Season 2, if not the entire show, Unhappy Campers. An episode that is divided between Moxie and Millie trying to find and kill someone for a client, with the other division being with Blitz trying to reconnect with his sister, who just so happens to be in cahoots with a drug trafficking target. For the Moxie and Millie portion, we get this odd insecurity issue with Millie that never really came up before this episode, and another rehash of Moxie with his confidence issues, which episodes like Murder Family, the Harvest Moon Festival, and X's and O's had similar characterization for Moxie as the plot, which, speaking of, really made the character Moxie be really unlikable to just prop up Millie. Funnily enough, that'll be something we'll get to later, but it really feels like a worse rendition of the previous stories, topped off with making me want to die from the awkwardness that Moxie displayed.
All week it's been, oh, look at Millard, isn't he great?
As a former crossplayer, I wanted to die watching that.
You what?
It honestly felt like the writers didn't know what they wanted to do with the characters and just decided to pad out the episode with Moxie and Millie scenes while Blitz was looking for his sister. Again, sometimes it's better to let the audience come to their own conclusion on things. Let's consider The Amazing Little Circus last episode for a comparison's sake. Most of the cast was working at a burger joint, with Kinger being left behind. The next time we see Kinger, it's him riding a bull, and somehow he was the only one to get an excellent score for the mission, even though he wasn't there. We don't need to actually know what the character is up to, because with an outlandish result like that, it allows your audience to have intrigue and come with their own theories as to what actually happened to the characters. There's a literary rule of sorts that people like to say ad nauseum. Show, don't tell. And while I would agree with that notion when it comes to important aspects of a story, much like drinking too much water, eating too many sweets, or spending God knows how much time analyzing an online piece of entertainment, too much of a good thing can be bad for you and your brain. In that regard, showing too much can be a bad practice. And there isn't a one-size-fits-all for this sort of thing, but one rule of thumb when it comes to this sort of writing is to understand what is actually important for your audience to see and what is superfluous. And what that is going to be dependent on what the artistic goal is for the writing. And you should base your writing around that, and it should be service in that goal of sorts. But if you show too much of the superfluous, it will muddy that path to the goal. It makes the narrative convoluted and overcomplicated, but not complex, because it brings up elements that don't really matter. Bring up paths that are dropped or settled off screen, or rehash something with a new coat of paint. Just because there are a lot of pieces in your narrative, that doesn't mean it's complex, especially since there are pieces that don't really contribute to the main goal. It just means you got scammed by Bill at the local flea market. And it sucks to say that, because it really is possible to make a great tight narrative and have the episodic nature of the episodes work, but because Helluva Boss is trying to do both, it makes it hard to get into with that regard. And it's more tragic because the characters are at the very least interesting, while the protagonists at least have potential. Here's another example of superfluous. If parts of a narrative can be cut and not really affect the outcome of what your goal is for the episode, you'll want to keep them to a minimum since they can bog down the narrative. I brought up Unhappy Campers earlier, but another example is Full Moon, where the only real important part of the episode is in the last 5 minutes, where Blitz and Stolas have their breakup scene. The rest of it is bogged down with probably some of the least relevant meandering with the cherubs, antagonists who ultimately suck.
You're cool!
Not that it isn't anything new with Helluva Boss, their villains ultimately do have a lot of issues, but my point is that we wasted a lot of time with their interactions in Hell while trying to kill Blitz, and they ultimately do not matter to the plot. So we just wasted all that time. Yay. Let's pivot to something I really want to sink my teeth into, since it's something that I've slowly been evolving my channel into, and that's the discussion of villains or antagonistic characters.
Mind if I got in?
Look, I love me good villains. They arguably have some of the most fascinating writing to them, as well as their designs just scream out to me. I don't know, maybe it's because I've become the villain to a lot of fandoms. But I do appreciate villains as my channel goes on. So, the villains of Helluva Boss just suck. Yeah, no dancing around this sort of thing, and there are two aspects of them that really make it hard for me to like them as villains.
You know, the two of us are superior than most of our kind. Why struggle to run a business that is rigged against you, when you could partner up with me and kill the unkillable?
A little longer than a few minutes later. With the,
line? The grimoire! Yeah, that.
The first is that there really isn't any depth to them, and the second is they're just slightly worse than a protagonist that make them the bad guy. One or another, this could make a villain work to me, but combined, it's a bad combination. Take a look at Stella.
Laugh?
No, you stupid cow!
In the first season, you had a character being set up to be a wife scorned by a cheating husband to the point where she was willing to set up a hitman to kill him. Her hate for her husband Stolas, it was...
Hate. Let me tell you how much I've come to hate you since I began to live.
It was...
I have no desire to stay in the place of a traitorous embarrassment. You have fallen from what little grace you had.
Yeah, that. And then season 2 happened and... the potential just went up in smoke, cause it was shown that Stella was just a straight up bitch and loves to be abusive to Stolas because he was forced to marry her in an arranged marriage. Like, she had the same thing, but whatever. And then she just becomes a dumb idiot with her brother showing up to take the reins of becoming the antagonist, even though he's just as dumb as her. Cheating on someone is a scummy thing to do. I'm pretty sure anyone can agree to that. And the first season of Helluva Boss, yeah, Stolas was made out to be cheating on his wife, Stella. Then season 2 comes around and shows that she was always a bitch and abusive, thus making Stolas out not to be the bad guy in that regard. Frankly, with this situation, it makes it hard to put fault on Stolas, and that's kind of a problem, but we'll get to that soon again. Back to the villains, the problem with them is that they're really not threatening either. Yeah, we see time and time again that they have big numbers to them, that they have skills, and they have all this power, but there's no real build-up and there's nothing to them but flash. Take, for example, Stella's brother Andy. Yes, I am aware that is not his actual full name, but at this point I don't care because the only people I've known who are named Andy have been jerks to me. I feel like it's appropriate.
With that sentence, you just lost the right to even talk to me.
I made a whole video talking about his quote-unquote plan and mastermind, which, mind you, if I had to make an entire 19-minute video dedicated to explaining why his plan had so many flaws in it, that should say something, even if you disagree.
That was harsh, huh? As if I give a shit!
But let me add something to it. Andy's plan begins and ends in the same episode, because rather than weaving his evil idea of putting Blitz on trial into the plot, he just comes with this slapdash plan and the story has been literally bent to make it work. It doesn't make him look like a genius, it makes him look like an idiot who got lucky, which for all I know could be actually the case here, but you never know. Still don't have to like it.
I don't care!
Imagine, if you will though, that instead of actually having this come up and be resolved in the same episode, Andy learns about the relationship between Stolas and Blitz near the beginning of the season. Then, throughout the entire rest of the season, studying IMP throughout it, maybe even having a spy get a read on the relationship between Stolas and Blitz, Andy crafts his plan to have Stolas be in a deadlock to choose to keep his position or to save the imp who captured his heart. You see, this actually alludes to the previous chapter where I talked about how episodic versus serialized storytelling can work but can still clash. Instead of having things off screen be done in the same episode, which is how the episodic nature works, imagine laying breadcrumbs to your audience that this was building up to, making at the very least Andy somewhat confident as a schemer because he's taking the time to learn about his targets and how they work to play off their emotions. Hell, by the time this video is out, I already made a video talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal's Vector. Someone who was a lot more competent as a villain in his planning and played the long game, even though technically speaking he lost almost every duel against the good guys. Yes, he did fail in the end due to a Deus Ex Machina, but Vector's planning and intricate scheming at least made sense. And let's get to the threat level, because boy oh boy, Andy himself, well... Cards on the table, I do not know if this is actually true, but someone told me in my comments that VivziePop once said that she wanted to make her villains both threatening and a joke. And considering that there have been times where she has explained things in live streams, this isn't outside the realm of possibility that she did say it. But I can't confirm it, so I'm just saying that. I bring this up because I can totally see her saying that. To make it clear, it's completely possible to make a threatening character who's also funny. I'm sure my editor and my fans, you can probably think of a prominent example that I've talked about on this channel multiple times.
Sam, thanks for coming in.
What's your game, Armstrong? Gonna talk me to death?
Like I said, son, time for your final interview.
But when you have scenes like this, where a power-deprived Stolas is beating up an iceberg. I'm sorry, but it doesn't really matter how menacing you make the character afterwards, that's going to be a defining moment. Fun fact, this should have been done during the actual fight scene. Maybe Stolas gets free and does this to distract Andy while the imps take down his ice dragon. At least you still have the whole...
Exactly, imagine what her mother will say when she finds out you got your ass handed to you by a gaggle of imps and a hellhound. I think that's what folks call a bad look.
And it still makes the character out to be menacing in some regard. Time for another example, folks. This time we're going back to Kamen Rider Gav. Because you can still make your villains a threat while having a joke element to them. So, meet Lage 9. He's a Granude who was just recruited to Stomach Inc., and boy howdy does he leave an impression. We're shown for a few episodes that the Granude has a nasty ability, that he can produce small tentacles that, when stinging a person, can introduce a toxin into their bloodstream that makes them happy and incapacitated for a while, which allows Lage 9 to harvest them. We're shown at least 2 scenes of this happening, and that he's a character capable of doing this quite easily, and that he hasn't been discovered by the heroes of the story, meaning he's a silent threat. However, when he gets a promotion of sorts, he actually sets up a trap to confront our heroes, armed with something new. By the way, people on your draw tablets, gonna need you to pay attention for a minute. That's right, you have this relatively scary looking jellyfish-based monster transforming with a pudding cup and gets this bright, colorful, and goofy looking design, and he becomes Kamen Rider Vlam. It's a little weird and kinda takes down the threat level of the character, right? Wrong. So, not only do we see him use his previously established power in a combative sense, but Vlam is able to show that even without that power, he's able to take on the main riders quite easily, treating them as a joke. Point is, the show not only establishes the character, but also takes the time to establish some of his powers, and then establishes him as a proper threat against the main characters. One can argue that Andy did establish his ice powers, but they certainly weren't done in a threatening manner. Hell, when he got angry at Stella, this was her reaction to it. My point for going through all of this is to showcase that you actually need to establish what your villains can do. You need to showcase why we should take them as a threat, and then you can actually play with them after that. Otherwise, if you don't, you run the risk of undercutting them. Also, since I just remembered that this needed to come up, why didn't Stella or Andy try to coax Octavia away from Stolas? They had a whole month to point out that if Stolas really did care for her, Stolas would have been there physically for Octavia. They could have planted the seeds of doubt that would have made them at least somewhat competent at manipulation, but instead...
Hilarious.
He thinks he's going to talk to his daughter. Hilarious.
They're just idiots. Another villain I want to point out who has a similar issue is Memon. You know, the walking, talking Christmas tree of a sin of greed.
Also, if you're a chick, maybe give up in your dreams now, because I'm not gonna lie, women just ain't funny. Anyway!
He's hinted at in earlier episodes, yes, but he isn't actually established until Fizz's episode, and he's made to be a terrible person. A very cheap embodiment of the sin of greed, and showing that he has a lot more of a monstrous form. All well and good, but there's a major problem with him as a villain. He's not a villain to the main cast. No, he's more or less a villain to Fizz and Ozzy, two side characters, with the former quitting from Memon and essentially telling him to F off in his song. So my question is, how is he a villain to Blitz? How is he a villain to Stolas? Well, he voted to have Blitz executed. So did several other demons. Are they villains now too, the Blitz? As a side note, I find Mamam as the embodiment of greed to be very surface level. I've seen much better representations of greed within characters who are literally named greed and have better characterization.
You want to bring back someone that you've lost. You might want money. Maybe you want women. Or you might want to protect the world. These are all common things people want. Things that their hearts desire. Greed may not be good, but it's not so bad either.
Or if you want another example, consider Crimson. Moxie's dad who happens to be the head of an imp mafia. In the first episode he's introduced to, he's actively being tricked by this guy.
What? Never interrupt the Chaz when he's in the middle of a long monologue.
Look, there's only one Chaz in my book, and it sure as hell ain't this lanky shark. My point is that this undercuts Crimson as a villain, especially when you consider I have a scene like this.
Now take care of the others.
It's supposed to invoke a no-nonsense bastard who ain't got time for your bullcrap, and you just make him out to be an idiot. It's a trend that happens with a lot of villains in Vivziepop's more popular work, and you can obviously disagree. I got some people telling me that Adam from Hazbin Hotel is a great villain, and while I personally would rather stick a knife in a toaster than agree, it's all a matter of preference in that regard. Of course, there's one thing that we do need to discuss, something even more egregious than the villains. I want to preface this part that my issues with the relationship between Stolas and Blitz isn't because it's between two guys. I personally don't care in that regard, especially when you consider the fact that I've been openly bi for a couple years at this point.
You did it. Good job. I can't believe it. I'm proud of you.
Kinda throws it out the window. No, it's because of one certain member in the group, Stolas. I've made it clear I am not a huge fan of the all, as shown by this video where I expressed the issues I had with Stolas' writing and how the show does have a tendency to paint the character as a victim, and how a lot of the issues in the relationship were because of Blitz, or that's how the show wants you to perceive it as. And my main issue was that the show never really punishes Stolas for his treatment of Blitz and how that never really gets addressed. That he does terrible things, but the show and the writers make it out that you should feel bad for him and that they are a really good person. Now, that's a very, very generalized and gross summary of what I said in my video, as was made before the season 2 finale. Like, duh, that video came out in July of last year, well before Sinmas. So, now that I've seen Sinmas, do I think my complaints have been fulfilled? Well, nope. Not really. Mainly because Stolas' treatment of Blitz and imps as a whole is never addressed or called out because, once again,
I don't look down on you! How many times do I... When have I ever... You speak just like that vile striker friend of yours.
Even if you want to say something like, oh, but now that Stolas has lost his position of power, he can finally see how the lower class lives and still doesn't get called out for his behavior, still has the support group of imps to help prop him up, and still in the end, gets Blitz. His behavior towards Blitz isn't properly addressed, and when it's pointed out and called out by Blitz himself, Stolas in the show put it on him.
Treat me like one of your little butler imps? You can't just dismiss me like that. I mean, you royal fucks think you can do this every time. Like you can just play with our feelings because we're smaller and not as important. Well, I'm not letting you, bitch! Let's go!
Blitz, I think so very highly of you. I didn't realize you think so low of me.
2 seconds later.
Where you are so cute when you are serious.
And I get it. Emotional moments, not thinking straight, drama, drama, llama, drama. But as I said in that video, if Stolas really wanted to make this work, he shouldn't have done this testing bullcrap and been upfront with Blitz at the start of things, even before Blitz got there. Especially since throughout season 1, Stolas made their relationship all about sex, until he learned that Blitz believes that's all the relationship is, and the time to give Blitz the choice to stay with them is on the sex night. Gee, I wonder why the imp who said this.
Stolas, don't act like what we have is anything but you wanting me to fuck you, okay? You make that really clear all the time.
Would think that this is all a joke. Ultimately, what did this scene even accomplish? If Stolas was still willing to throw his life away, which, yes, he went to the courthouse with the intent of him getting 86'd from the mortal coil for his actions, and this whole thing isn't going to be addressed afterwards, then I'm sorry, but having a happy and goofy montage doesn't address the awkward feelings and emotions that come along with these scenes. It comes off as that they're just ignoring it. Let's just forget about the bad times, cram them away in text messages that you have to pause the screen to read, and the two twigs are making love, and googly eyes. Big anime googly eyes. I don't think I'd have much of a problem with Stolas as a character if there was some actual call out that stuck and had actual effect on him. Because, no, Stolas sacrificing himself isn't facing the repercussions of treating Blitz and the imps badly. Even that montage that's shown is a band-aid on a gunshot wound because when Stolas gets treated horribly by other imps, Blitz to the rescue to fight or make things right. Stolas cheating? Well, his wife's a raging psychopathic bitch, so it's okay to cheat on your spouse. Not like he couldn't have gotten that divorce right after Octavia was born, since the only reason why Stolas was forced to marry Stella was to produce a cautionary heir. Stolas was an outcast and never had anyone in the Goetia looking out for him. Oh, Helluva Sago, who was teased earlier in the season but only appeared in one episode, showing that he wants there to be a fair trial, wanting to get Stolas there to actually get his input on the matters at hand and supporting Stolas' expression and song. Where the hell were you all this time? But really, it's a lack of accountability that really gets me, and how the show is doing what it can to make Stolas be out this good person and victim when he really isn't. He doesn't have to be a good person, he's a demon. It's jumping through hoops in that matter, and you can see this more and more when it comes to Octavia's relationship with Stolas. A daughter and father relationship that honestly, I'd have to say is kinda well done in my opinion. Yeah, shock of all shocks. I'm on page 23 of the script and I'm saying Helluva Boss did something right with its writing, with Octavia's development and her rejection of her father. My problem is how people are willing to defend Stolas in that regard.
You have always been the only good thing in my life.
So does that mean you just stayed miserable because of me? Was I some fucking obligation? Is that why you didn't even hesitate?
Octavia, that is so abysmally far from what he was saying.
Because that's exactly how Stolas feels. He said it outright to Stella.
The only reason I have endured your constant insults and cruelty was for that girl to have a normal life.
So, is that not how he felt? Stolas outright said that he was tolerating Stella's abuse so Octavia could have a normal life. Are we just ignoring that confession? Are we also ignoring the pill bottles that Octavia found in Stolas' stuff that are literally used to numb away his pain?
Annoying. She's so annoying and so repetitive. If I have to hear...
I know some people have said they're antidepressants, but I mean, it's hard to say in that regard. But yes, let's just ignore the fact that Stolas has, for example, dragged Octavia to a kid's amusement park under the guise of wanting to spend time with her, only to flirt with the guy who Stolas cheated with right in front of Octavia. Some people would call that a lie and disgusting. Or how about when Stolas was about to throw his life away to save Blitz, literally giving himself up for the imp and leaving Octavia, which she had pay-per-view viewing on. You know, something he said he wasn't gonna do to her in this scene.
Are you gonna run off with him and leave me behind? Go away where I can't find you?
What? No. No, never. I'd never do that. Never.
And he literally does that in Season 2.
Golly, do something new. Feel something new. You were so close. That song was great. You had a great moment of growth during that song. Get over it!
Get over it, huh? Her dad almost killed himself to save Blitz, and was going to leave her behind. You want her to get over that. Why are we ignoring this?
I love you, Fia, so much. Please, sweetie, let me explain.
I can't. You lied to me once, and you'll do it again.
Literally, just have a conversation. This is so explainable. Have one 15-minute long conversation, and I swear to God, Octavia will be brought up to speed with everything and on his side.
Well, maybe the conversation was actually before Stolas had almost killed himself at the trial and before he took a month to actually stomp up to the mansion, because here's a question. Why didn't Stolas go a month earlier to see his daughter in person? Seriously, if he was going to have a confrontation with Andy, what was stopping him from doing it a month prior? Over 500,000 views, huh? Ugh. Again, I'm not trying to pick a fight or such, but this is more to showcase how far people are willing to ignore Stolas' actions and words, even when they're right in front of them, to defend him and make it so his consequences aren't justifiable. I would also chalk this up to the fact that Helluva Boss does technically have like a lot of gaps in there, so some people might forget the key details here and there, but yeah, that's just me. Stolas is a terrible father. Someone who's given a lot of leeway from his daughter, and cards on the table. Ever since my own father passed away, I've always been a sucker for father characters. Their stories tend to hit me right in the feels, cause I guess I'm just that messed up with the lack of a father in my life nowadays. So when I see people who are clearly trying to paint Stolas as the main victim in all this, as if his actions didn't lead him down this way and are willing to put the blame onto his daughter, the kid whose life was ripped right in shreds in front of her, her father blatantly hitting on the guy he cheated with, and was more interested in arguing with his wife than talking to his daughter, and as a reminder, in case you guys forgot, almost killed himself to save the guy he cheated with. I guess the takeaway is this. Stolas sucks as a character, and you can certainly like him, but you in the show need to acknowledge that fact and not ignore what he's actually said and done.
The definition of insanity.
This is something of a bit of a last minute thing I need to bring up, but it's just logical questions that need to be asked, because here's the thing. There's a difference between having people come up with their own conclusions and just ignoring logic. Logic is necessary in your story, because when there's a number of times when you're forced to say, why didn't insert character do this, or wait, that doesn't make any sense, then that can cause your plot to have a few more holes than the Swiss cheese. I brought up a few logical inconsistencies in Mastermind, especially with Andy's plan and how slipshod it was. This has the nasty effect of making the character look incredibly stupid and makes it so much easier to see the writer's puppet strings to twist and turn the plot to make things happen. No, this isn't, the characters aren't 100% logical, therefore bad writing. It's more along the lines of, this is something the characters should have done because they've been shown to do it, so why didn't they? I understand that characters and people are illogical, but when you literally have something that can fix the situation strapped to the back of your hand, hint, hint, I'm gonna have a few questions about the character's brain. I also want to give a few examples other than one that hopefully won't take as much time either, and I'll even use the latest 2 episodes to make my points since there are some big holes in those plots. So, in the episode Mastermind, when IMP are trying to escape the Hell Police, there's one question that really needs to be asked. Why the fuck didn't Blitz use his Asmodean crystal to disappear into the human world with his family and friends? No, seriously, it's a legitimate question. We've seen in the past he's able to make portals big enough to transport his van, twice, and we also know that he can use it immediately. So why didn't he use that when the interns are being used as a distraction? Why didn't he do that while in the building? It's not like the officers were storming the building at that point. IMP could have easily escaped from hell and hid themselves in the human world. Lord knows that they can easily blend in.
Oh my god, it's a fucking possum!
I bring this up because it raises questions, and there are people who will raise good points, such as it being stressful time, and in order to use the crystal, you have to turn it on.
Tight.
And to that I say,
Oh
damn.
Gee, it's almost like a stressful situation where there's still a bit more time isn't so much an excuse, especially since the damn thing is on Blitz's hand. Like, seriously, I get that law enforcement is incompetent, but if you have minutes on end to destroy evidence, why wouldn't you have Moxie do this thing to turn on the crystal? Or how about the excuse of, the police said turned off teleportation, which has no indication in the show that happened. I have a rule in this world of fiction. If it's not in the show, it doesn't count. That includes fan theories, interviews, or explanations after the fact. If it wasn't important enough to put in the show then, why should I believe it is now when it's trying to fix a problem? And then there will be people who will turn around and say to me, unironically, that Helluva Boss covers all the little details, like having Octavia's phone display the number of Blitz, but have him be referred to as Dad's shitty boyfriend's number. And that's nice and all, but when you have major issues like the lack of the Asmodean crystal being used to escape, the little details do not matter. Sinmas, while not as egregious, debatably has a pretty big one. So, after the trial, Stolas tries to contact his daughter Octavia, and Stella takes away Octavia's phone so she can't talk to her father. I mean, aside from the very blatant act of sabotage that's happening in front of Octavia's eyes with these two idiots, and aside from the fact that we don't get a scene of Stella or Andy trying to turn Octavia against her father, nothing happens for a month. Yep. It isn't until a month later that both Stolas and Octavia go, screw this, I'm going to see my dad and daughter. I'm just thinking here, why didn't they do this sooner? I get that they wanted to include Sinmas for the namesake, but how about instead of showing that montage of Blitz and Stolas having everyday things happen, why not include a few scenes where Octavia is being prevented from leaving the mansion to see her father, or Stolas being turned away from the gates? Just something to show the characters were doing something more productive than trying to use the damn phone, cause it's shown that it won't work. It comes off as laziness, especially when we're shown explicitly that Octavia could easily sneak out from Stella and Andy to see her dad. She knows where IMP's office is. She goes there later in the episode, so what was stopping her now? It's stuff like this that makes it hard for me to really enjoy Helluva Boss, because if the show doesn't bother to explain why they waited a month to do this, it's just showing the writers manipulating the logic of the world just to make things work, and in the worst way. And yet, despite all my criticisms, despite all my issues with the show and writers, you know one of the biggest things I want to say is, I want to love this show. Helluva Boss as an indie animation is a show that obviously inspires a lot of people to seek out their own creative endeavors, and I'm no different in that regard. I love the world that VivziePop crafted, but the unfortunate part of that is that the characters within it aren't really given the actual care they deserve, at least in my opinion. The writing is not great. There are way too many characters, with side characters getting a lot more attention and depth, and the focus of the show shifted from the premise. I want to like the show, but I also don't want to turn off my brain to enjoy it, since it's also trying to tackle so many themes and elements that I would like to look into. Classism, love, and all that other stuff too. I know that I can only speak for myself, and that's all I intend to do, but I do hope you guys can at least see where I'm coming from with all these critiques and points. And I'm pretty sure I haven't gone to all the issues I've had with this video. I mean, this video is almost an hour long, and I probably could keep going, but I don't want to make my editors go insane. So I'll leave you with this. You can like Helluva Boss. You can enjoy it. Don't let someone like me who has issues with it take that away from you. But at the same time, acknowledge that people will have issues with the things that you love, with the things that you enjoy. As for me, I hope that when Season 3 drops, they do fix issues. I know there are a lot of people who have been dropping the show, and it's understandable. I want to give it one more chance. And if not, well, I can at least say I enjoyed what it made. In any case, I'm MangaKamen, thank you for watching, and peace out. Later.